Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Come Back Stronger, where we bring you stories of people who have overcome significant adversity in their lives and come back stronger to help other people. I'm Dana Brooks, and I'm joined with my law partner, Jimmy Fasig. We have got an exciting guest today, y'all. We've got Tom Voss. You may have seen him. He's pretty famous, and you'll learn why. Tom is one of those people who puts his life on the line for all of us. He was a U.S. Army Ranger, and he was a sniper platoon in Mosul, Iraq, I guess. And as you might imagine, he's seen and done a lot of things that nobody else will ever see or do. And that leaves you affected, and it makes it hard to re-enter society and act in any other way than you've been trained. So he struggled with that a lot, and so he's written a book. There's a documentary of him as well. You'll hear about it more in the show. But Jimmy, he contemplated suicide when he came back. PTSD, the things he had done and seen, and
this happens with a lot of war veterans.
Yes.
A lot of war veterans, they see things, they do things that human beings should never have to see or do. Yep. And so it traumatizes them. And so he has overcome that trauma, and he is now literally using the lessons that he learned to try to help other veterans and to help everybody else really in the world.
You'll like him. His moniker, he's the meditating vet. That's what he's known as, but we'll get into it a little bit. But his book is Recovering from PTSD and Moral Injury Through Meditation. Moral injury he'll talk about, and that's something I actually was not familiar with. But the book is Where War Ends, a combat veteran's 2,700 mile journey to heal. Because as he was contemplating suicide, he thought to himself, let me try something else. Let me try something. And he got someone to go on a journey with him from Milwaukee to California. And that was where he learned meditation, and he learned
it changed his life.
He learned that he had a life worth living. So when we get back, we'll have Kimmy Hogan's interview with Tom Voss right after this.
And you know what the insurance company offered him? $5,000.
Really?
He's completely blind, and they offer him $5,000. Yeah. Ask him to sign a release.
To a lot of people, especially when they're hurting and when they're down and when they're vulnerable, $5,000 is a life-changing amount of money. Yeah. And they're not looking at the value of what has been lost. They're not looking at what it would take to make that person whole, which is our job. Yeah. That's our job. Their job isn't. Their job is to save the insurance company money. Right. And they look at this person and they go, I bet $5,000 would get your full attention. Right. And they come in and they dangle it with a settlement release, and then once you sign it, you're done. You can't come back to us and ask us to wave a magic wand and make that go away. That can't go away.
My client didn't accept the $5,000. We took him all the way to trial. We got a $5 million verdict.
And we are back for Kimmy Hogan's first interview with Tom Voss.
Tom Voss, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So you are the meditating vet, is that right?
That is correct, yeah.
I am thrilled that you're here with us today to share your story of your journey for hope and healing. You served in Iraq in 2003 to 2006, is that right?
Yeah, I was in the United States Army from 2003 to 2006, and then did a deployment to Mosul, Iraq from 2004 to 2005.
Okay. And what was your role in the Army?
So I was in the infantry, but specifically I was part of our battalion scout sniper platoon. So my job was reconnaissance and intelligence gathering.
Okay. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I'd like to know the story of how you became the meditating vet.
Right. So after I got out of the military, I had a lot of struggles dealing with the challenges of war, of coming home from war. Right. I had two of my friends, our platoon sergeant and one of our squad leaders, who were both killed in action. And you don't really have the time to process those things while you're in a deployment. So what ends up happening is you come back home from war, you get out of the military, and that's when you kind of start processing or beginning the process of understanding, what did I participate in? How did it impact me? really taking a good deep look while trying to get your life on track, right? At that time, I got out of the military. All my friends were graduating college, so I felt I had to play catch up and get into school and use my GI Bill and get my own apartment and do all these things that I felt like I had missed while I participated in this like amazingly horrific experience that is war.
Yeah.
So the challenges began as soon as I got back, and it took me about 2 years to even go in to see anyone to ask for help, right? Because in the military, or especially in the infantry, right, we're trained to be able to endure suffering, right? To endure challenges, to always drive on, drive through, no matter what the circumstances is. And that doesn't really serve you in the civilian world, right? Especially when you're dealing with mental health and wellness, right? Ignoring and shoving things down and pushing things aside, right, doesn't make them go away. It just kind of mutes the expression of the feelings that you're trying to avoid.
So you come back, and instead of having the time and focus to try to heal, your training tells you to push it down and to endure, and then you're trying to catch up on life, trying to use the GI Bill, trying to move things along instead of processing everything that you've just gone through.
Right, exactly. So what ends up happening then is the things that you're avoiding, right, end up rearing their head in your day-to-day life, right? So it was really challenging for me to be in school, right, because I'm not processing the things that have impacted me so deeply. So I can't even pay attention in school, and I end up dropping out multiple times. So I end up burning through my GI Bill because of mental health issues, right? My inability to concentrate, my inability to be around people because of manifesting symptoms of post-traumatic stress, right? So it makes it really difficult when you're in a constant state of fight or flight, assessing situations, all things that serve you when you're in a combat zone, right? These are our natural response to abnormal situations, right? So trying to navigate life while you're essentially in fight or flight mode has extreme challenges. And you end up feeling isolated because you don't feel that you can relate to anyone. And there's so few people that have the experience of combat that you kind of accept the fact that this is how I am. No one can relate to me. And then your isolation becomes like solidified. So you're really not open to sharing with anyone, because who could relate? Who can relate to me, right? Who can understand this experience of combat when so few people have experienced it?
So when did you get to the point where you realized I've got to do something if I'm going to try to get better? Because I know you've reached a breaking point where you were on the brink of suicide. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. And I always like to say, when it comes to suicide, people who end up moving through with suicide or dying by suicide, it's not because they want to take their own life. It's because they want to stop suffering.
Yeah.
Right. So the suffering is so intense that you don't feel that you have any other options. You feel so alone. You feel so unable to connect with people that you feel that this is my only way out. So I was in that same boat. And at that point, I think I had two friends that had died, one by suicide, the other by overdose from medication. And I was in a position where I'm like, I get it. I understand why they did what they did, because I don't want to feel what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Right. And it becomes a very enticing option. So I got to a point of where I was starting to contemplate, and it's called suicidal ideation, right? So you're starting to think of ways that you could execute this, right? So something happened to where I'm like, that's such an extreme option that before I go down that road, I need to at least put in some effort, so like a big effort into trying to help myself in some way, whatever that was. And at that point, it just came to me that I needed to take some time to really be with myself. And the way that I thought to do that was by walking from Wisconsin to California. So those are my two options. I'm like, I got to at least put in some effort to try and better myself. And then I was like, if that didn't work, then we'll see what happens after that. But I'm really grateful that, I had that moment to kind of step back and realize that, we have to give our 100%. We have to really give effort into healing ourselves, because no one outside of you can do that, right? Mm-hmm. You have people that can help and support you in your healing journey, but it's us that needs to take that first step to be able to help ourselves.
Absolutely. Well, we've got to go to a commercial break, but when we come back, I want to hear about that trek.
Wow. That was a pretty good story.
He's a very impressive man.
Yeah.
And what I loved about what he said was that you have got to put that 100% effort into it. And it's about, he made the big effort. So many people are struggling with mental health issues,
yeah, they are.
with all sorts of issues, but mental health is a particularly challenging one. Yeah. And I love
it. Doesn't show up on an x-ray.
Right.
It doesn't show up in a blood test. And so it's so hard for a lot of people to believe it's real. Mm-hmm. It just seems like buck up, straighten your back up, get your, head out of the clouds and just re-engage and everything will be fine.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that it's a sign of weakness, but we're talking about, this is a guy that is a soldier. I mean, he's about
as alpha male as you can get. This is not a soft man.
No,
this is not a weakness of character.
No, he just had some things to deal with, and what he did was, what I loved about it is a massive effort. He decided, I'm going to make a massive effort towards healing. Mm-hmm. And I think that is absolutely what has to be done in all of our lives, all of our lives. What an impressive guy.
What I thought was very interesting, because it finally occurred to me a good way to explain post-traumatic stress disorder is kind of the way he did, which was he was a normal person put in a very abnormal situation. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so he learned that became his new normal, such that when he was back into normal situations, he had abnormal reactions. Mm-hmm. He just was no longer wired for the environment he was in. And then he looks around saying, well, who else is like me? Not a soul. Yeah. Can you imagine how alone and just desolate you might feel? We're going to take a commercial break. We're going to come back and we're going to have the second half of Kimmy Hogan's interview with Tom Voss right after this.
To me, Come Back Stronger is about starting the case with a plan and with a goal of not just to get back to where you were, but to actually move forward in your life. When an insurance company sees that you've been hurt and you've been in an accident and you've got medical bills, you've got pain and suffering, you have property damage to your vehicle, you are at a very low point in your life. And what an insurance company will do is they will try to take advantage of you. They might show up at your door with a check for $500 to try to get you to sign on the bottom line.
They'll show up at the hospital.
They'll show up at the hospital. They'll tell you not to get an attorney. They will do anything they can to save the insurance company money. And if you hire a lawyer and come back stronger, then you are going to be dealing with them on a level playing field.
And we are back and ready for Kimmy Hogan's second part of her interview with Tom Voss.
All right, Tom, so we're back, and you were telling us the point in your life where you had the option of suicide or trying to do something else, and so you came up with this idea to take a, what'd you say, 2,700-mile trek?
Yep.
Wow. And so you said, let's try the trek. Tell me how you came up with that idea, and, how'd you decide who to do it with?
When I decided to do the trek, the idea was to walk to California and then visit my friends that I served with, right? To go see and reconnect with them. And that was the driving force. And then I had another friend who we didn't serve together, but we were deployed at the same time, right? So he was deployed to Baghdad and I was up in Mosul, and I told him what I was going to do. And he basically said he was in the same boat and that like, if he didn't do something now, right, it's just like, he didn't know what was going to happen. Right. Yeah. And he had a young family at the time. Mm-hmm. So we had different goals, right? Mine was kind of to process the death of my friends and how my war experience had impacted me, and his was to become a better father and a better husband. But we both left from Wisconsin with everything on our backs. We had everything in our backpacks or rucksacks, and over 5 months and 7 states. Started walking and started processing and started to use each other to kind of support ourselves in that process of processing what we experienced and how we would navigate different things. And that's why the power of peer support is so powerful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So how did the meditation work with this? Were y'all meditating while you walked? What were those guiding principles? How did all that get in there?
Prior to that, I had no meditation experience whatsoever. And we ended up learning while we were trekking across the country, right? So I have to say before we started the walk, you wouldn't have caught me in a meditation class or anything like that, right? I had no idea about it or anything. But when you get to a point of being so sick and tired of being sick and tired, you have to kind of throw everything on the table, right? So I was very open to trying new things and really trying to do whatever I could to find relief, to find something that was that I could do on my own, right? Mm-hmm. And kind of bolster a toolkit to be able to manage what I was experiencing. So we learned meditation while we're walking across the country. And we just started practicing and implementing those strategies while we were walking across the country. So what ends up happening is we become stressed out or distressed, right? And meditation is a way that we can bring balance back into our lives, right? Mm-hmm. So it needs to be a balance between tension and relaxation, right? And when we don't have that balance in our lives, it becomes distress.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you about the term moral injury, because I've seen that in your book and on your website. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So I found out about moral injury right around when we started the trek. I think that was early 2013. But before that, all I heard about and was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress in 2008. That diagnosis didn't really resonate with me, but I was like, okay, yeah, I have these symptoms like insomnia, hyper alertness, flashbacks, these different things that kept happening in my life. But when I heard about moral injury, and the definition of moral injury is when you witness or participate or fail to prevent acts that transgress your deeply held sense of right or wrong, right? So we're looking at like the core of our being, and what I noticed was that I was having symptoms of post-traumatic stress, but at the same time, I was experiencing moral injury. So the questions that you're able to start asking yourself after you're out of the service and start to process your experience is, can I be forgiven for what I've done? Can I be a good member of my community, right? After the things I've seen and witnessed and participated in. And you're beyond those things that have happened in the past. But the problem is if you're unwilling to look at those things and process those things and understand that you're not those things, right? They just kind of stay around.
Mm-hmm. And so you have recognized what moral injury is, and then you're encouraging vets to meditate on their moral injury to help move through it. Is that fair to say?
Right. And it sounds counterintuitive, but the lessons are in the pain, right? The pain helps us integrate and understand the things that we're not, right? And it's, I'm talking about it like it's just this easy thing to do, but it's a challenging thing to do. It takes a lot of courage to be able to sit down and objectively look at yourself and what you did and what you participated in, the bigger picture, the broader picture of, how we came to be in this war and how I came to participate in this war. And another really big aspect of moral injury is institutional betrayal, right? So understanding, when I'm sitting in Mosul, Iraq, and understanding that there's no weapons of mass destruction here. And then why am I here then? Right? Why are civilians being killed? Why am I participating in this if there's not a justification in my eyes, for us to be here, right? So then you start really feeling that moral pinch and pain about, am I justified in what I'm doing, right? And you can't really talk about this, right? When you're in a combat zone, you're in the military, you just kind of have to do what you need to do to survive in that moment. But when you get out and you start to have time to be able to reflect and understand your role and responsibilities, it can be challenging.
Yeah. Well, Tom, thank you so much for coming on to talk with us about it. I want to let everyone know that you've written a memoir called Where War Ends, and you have an Emmy-nominated film, Almost Sunrise, that was about your trek. How, if folks are watching this and they want to get in contact with you, how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, they could reach out directly through my website, themeditatingvet.com. Feel free to shoot an email. I'm happy to help and support and answer any questions for veterans or family members or anyone who's either interested in my experience or that story. I'm happy to support.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you so much for your service.
Wow, I know he spoke a lot of your language.
Oh, well, meditation has absolutely changed my life. And so what I loved about what he said mostly was ultimately he was talking about the power of forgiveness. He's talking about the power of forgiving yourself for whatever horribles you've done. Of course, in a combat situation, it really could be some really horrible things, but it applies to every single one of us, because until you're able to forgive yourself and also forgive others who have done you wrong, then you are suffering.
Yeah, you are.
And you've got so much energy, dark energy caught up inside of you that you can't get past it a lot of times. And so the key is meditating. And what
Say more about that. Say how meditation helps you deal with feelings of guilt and shame.
So what happens is most people, the guilt and the shame, we just push it down. We just push it down. We don't deal with it. We don't ever want to think about it. So we keep ourselves in this activity, this constant frantic activity to keep ourselves busy so we don't have to think about
occupied.
it. But what meditation does is all you're doing is you're there sitting in silence with your eyes closed, and you're sitting in silence, and then all of that darkness, that dark energy, those dark thoughts, they come up. You have to allow them to come up so that you can feel the pain and you can process them, and then you can actually, after a while, you can actually provide meaning to them. In other words, you start to realize that this is part of who I've become. And yet ultimately the goal is to become thankful for everything that you've been through so you could learn the lessons you need to learn to become the person that you're supposed to become. And that's what meditation's all about.
Yeah, and I could see that. For me, it's always been difficult because I can't sit in silence. Everything in the world starts coming into my head, and I've learned that fighting it is not the goal. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. You know, you let it come up, you do, and I get a lot out of it when I could pull it off. But I like that this guy took such a big effort toward this. I mean, he's like, it's either something major or I'm not here anymore. So I appreciate that, and anybody who's struggling with suicidal ideation, I hope you got something from that, because there's a bunch of people just waiting for you to try one more time, just a little bit harder. I promise you, you may not even know they're there, but they are there and they want you to try. But when we get back from this break, we're going to wrap up our final thoughts on the Tom Voss interview.
They might show up at your door with a check for $500 to try to get you to sign on the bottom line. They will do anything they can to save the insurance company money, and if you hire a lawyer and come back stronger, then you are going to be dealing with them on a level playing field.
You know what I tell my clients is that Come Back Stronger is not just a slogan, it's a game plan. Yes. Because in order to get you fair compensation, we have to prove to the insurance company that you are doing everything you can to get better.
Yes.
And when you do everything you can to get better, if you're still hurting, then insurance company, you better pay. Right. Because we want to make you whole. So it's not just an idea of let's make you better after this horrible thing happened. It's a plan to make you better.
And I think in coming up with that plan, it makes us better lawyers too.
100%.
Because I think having that game plan helps us achieve more and be more successful for the client.
And we are back finishing our interview discussion about Tom Voss and his experience first in the military and then developing PTSD and running out of hope, running out of purpose,
Becoming
not
suicidal.
understanding what his role in this world was anymore, or if he fit in with it. Jimmy, he talked about moral injury. That to me sounded like personal dissonance, kind of like an incongruence whenever your behavior, your actions are not fitting with your value system.
Yeah, and ultimately what he's talking about is guilt.
Yeah.
He's talking about guilt, and so many of us have done things that we're not proud of, that we're not, that...
and it injures you.
It really does, and that it
Yeah.
causes it can cause a very deep scar, especially when it's incongruent with what the person that you want to be.
Right.
Because what we're doing in life is we're constantly being guided, I believe, by the universe to become who we're supposed to be. So we all have this deep inner desire to become our highest and best self, and when we're acting exactly the opposite of that, it causes scarring, it causes pain.
Yeah, it does. And you know, whenever I was growing up, we had people in our family who had gone to war, and then they come back and they're just quiet, and you leave them alone. And they just never really seem to have a full life like everybody else, and out of deference and respect to them for what they sacrificed, you give them your space. Or we've all heard people talk about when my dad came back from Vietnam, he'd wake up under the bed and he would be scared. And this younger generation, and it could be because of all the media available to them, the social media, the internet, all the things that they have knowledge of. You're not sending the same batch of young men to war that you probably were a generation or several generations ago. They do think about the morality of what you're doing. They don't blindly follow because of chain of command hierarchy. They do question, and they do want to be able to live with themselves. And when they come back, they don't just go through the motions like zombies. A lot of them decide they want out. And we have an epidemic of suicide among our veterans and our PTSD survivors.
What I love about Tom Voss's story is that he shows you absolutely that you can overcome the PTSD. You can overcome mental health issues. I mean, it's not easy. It's a major struggle, but it can be done in a lot of circumstances. Maybe not every circumstance, but in a lot of circumstances, because he had to have one of the most challenging ones because of what he was doing.
Yeah, and you weren't always that way. You won't always stay that way. So if this is affecting you, please know there's help out there for you. And thank you for watching another episode of Come Back Stronger. We hope to see you again next week. Thanks for watching.
I love nothing more than when a former client refers me a friend or a relative, because that shows me that they really appreciated what I was able to do for them.
And the thing that's most rewarding to me and the thing that I'm proudest about with this firm is that we truly do love our clients. I've got them in my phone. I follow them on social media. I celebrate when they have their grandbabies or when they change jobs or when they have, their first baby. And that's real. And it's so rewarding from a personal standpoint and a professional standpoint. And I think that realness and that relationship helps us make their cases so much better too.
100%.
They're not just another number to us. They're not just a cog in the wheel. They're not just a way for us to make a living. It's just a way for us to have better lives ourselves by getting to know so many clients and helping them.
I think that's why so many of our clients come back to us and send people that they love.
That's true.